Welcome to THISDAY Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and THISDAY Live begins now. Coming up in the next hour, heightened insecurity in northern Nigeria. Northern elite and socio-cultural groups cry out. President Muhammadu Buhari raised the Riot Act to security chiefs. Primary around the corner, the crisis in the ruling All Progressives Congress boils over. Image, Governor Godwin Obaseki defects with the opposition People's Democratic Party. And Brazil becomes the second country to hit 1 million coronavirus cases after the United States. And Nigeria heads for 20,000 infections as the NCDC, the Center for Disease Control, announces 661 new COVID-19 cases. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed dissatisfaction with the performance of the service chiefs in the counter-insurgency war and other security threats confronting Nigeria. The president, who gave the verdict last week at a meeting with the service chiefs, warned that he would no longer tolerate excuses from them for the failures and their apparent inability to protect the territorial integrity of the country. President Buhari reminded them that no one was forced on him, as he selected everyone individually based on what he felt were their track records. He warned them to live up to expectations in the discharge of their duties. According to him, a lot of responsibility had been placed on their shoulders, and it was extremely important that they do not disappoint the populace. The meeting came on the heels of the outcry by many persons in the north and socio-cultural groups in the region who called for removal of the service chiefs due to the rising spate of murderous attacks in the northeast by Boko Haram and the Islamic State of the West African province, ISWAP, and in the northwest, where so-called armed bandits have unleashed a reign of terror in recent weeks. Here, to dissect the spate of rising insecurity in northern Nigeria and whether the service chiefs have outlived their usefulness or not, we have today on this program Professor Usman Yusuf, Professor of Hematology, Oncology, and Bone Marrow Transplantation, and a former Executive Secretary of the National Health Insurance Scheme, NHIS, and Mr. MAHMUD, JEGA, columnist and chairman of the Daily Trust Editorial Board. But before then, we'll teach to the statement by the National Security Advisor, and then we'll return to welcome Professor Yusuf and Malam JEGA to the program.
Mr. President has expressed great concern over the declining security situation in the country. He is extremely unhappy about what is happening, and he feels that even though the security agencies are doing their best is not good enough for him, and he wants an immediate reversal of the current trend, an immediate reversal of our misfortunes in all their dimensions. Mr. President also told us clearly, in no uncertain terms, that he and indeed the administration came to power on the platform of 3 issues: fighting insecurity, overcoming our economic difficulties, and dealing with the scourge of corruption. And he also noted that it takes common sense for anyone to understand that without security, the pursuit of the other 2 objectives will just be an exercise in futility. and therefore he wants the security agencies to take into consideration the wider implication of the gradual descent of the security of this country.
Well, welcome to the program, Professor Yusuf and Malam JEGA. Good to have you here. Thank you very much for agreeing to join us on This Day Live. Let me start with you, Professor Yusuf. You just listened to the National Security Advisor. What's your take on the president reading the Riot Act? Do you think this is too little, too late? Many Nigerians have said what we want is not a Riot Act. What they want, according to Afenifere, for example, or the Pan-Niger Delta Forum, PANDEF, is for the service chiefs to be sacked, fired. They think that they have outlived their usefulness. But what's your own take? What do you think? Malam JEGA, I will come to you later on the same question. Hello, Professor Yusuf. I can't hear you here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay, good. Yes. We also the press conference after the president. And I will tell you, if anything did not give me any comfort, if anything, it made me worried. 5 years into the administration, we're still talking about safeguards. We're still talking about improving synergy between the services. I mean, it's too late. What's been happening, we've done years, we're 4 years to go. And what we are seeing is deteriorating security, especially in the Northwest. So it's not acceptable. We have seen these meetings time and time again, where the president has met service chiefs, and at the end, nothing happens. So we have to go beyond it and honestly see real, actionable differences in the lives of our people. We've not been seeing that. I'm highly disappointed. I'm not happy. And I ask myself, what are they going to do now that they've not done in the last 5 years? So we have work to do. Nigerians are not happy. We're here to tell the government to hear. We love this country more than we love anything.
Malam JEGA, you are with me. What's your own take on this subject? Do you want the service chiefs fired?
Well, the way I see it, the president is the only elected officer in the executive branch. And he is the one who is accountable to the people of Nigeria. If he wants to retain the service chiefs, that is his prerogative. But in the end, he is the one who will be held responsible for the overall outcome. Now, this Riot Act that you said he read should have been read a very long time ago, because this problem didn't start today. The Boko Haram insurgency is more than 10 years old now. And the banditry in the Northwest and in the North Central has also been on for nearly a decade. So it's not, I believe, a problem that just reading the Riot Act today can solve. Although, of course, the security agencies have the personnel and the equipment to do something. It may not solve the problem entirely. That one will require going back to the drawing board and also addressing the inadequacies of the security agencies and of society generally in order to be able to tackle such a terrible problem.
Well, Malam JEGA, let me stay with you a little bit. You wrote an article on June 15, which was titled Fire from Borno to Sokoto, and you talked about the transformation in the north a once peaceful North that has now become a hotbed of violence and banditry. What, in your opinion, accounts for that transformation, which surprised you?
Well, Ruben, it was slow in coming. The truth is that up until 20, 30 years ago, northern Nigeria was in many ways the most peaceful part of the country, even though there were other problems. Like I said, there was some political violence, there were intercommunal clashes, and every now and then you also have some violent religious sects. But with respect to crimes such as armed robbery, the North was quite peaceful until fairly recently. Now, the two major problems that we have, the Boko Haram problem and the banditry problem, they have slightly different roots. Boko Haram is only the latest fanatical pseudo-religious sect that we are having in northern Nigeria, but you know we had others dating back to the 19th century. The worst before Boko Haram was the Metatsine that we had from 1980 to around 1993. So Boko Haram is just a continuation of that, even though it upped the ante with its ideology of opposition to Western education, which is a fairly new phenomenon. As for the bandits in the Northwest, what is apparent is that the old pastoral society is facing an unprecedented crisis. It's a combination of many things, population pressure, social pressure, environmental degradation, and many things. So a lot of the pastoralists lost their cattle and resorted to cattle rustling. And it looks now like the elders of the pastoral community have lost control over the youth. And let's be frank, this is not the first time this is happening in Nigeria, because I remember former President Obasanjo saying in 1999 that the elders of the Niger Delta lost control over the youth of the Niger Delta. So we have this terrible situation on our hands. It's not something that can be solved overnight, but at the minimum we have to seriously reduce the violence in both Northeast and Northwest and also parts of the North Central before the government must now sit down and address the long-term solutions to these problems.
Well, Professor YUSUF, the same day that MAHMUD JEGA wrote Fire from Borno to Sokoto, you also wrote an article, just by coincidence, Silence in the Face of Evil is Evil Itself. And I enjoyed reading the piece very much, but I was concerned that you concentrated on northern Nigeria, Arewa North, Arewa as it were. You didn't nationalize the subject. Is there a special reason for that? Because yes, I thought you would have considered the whole country.
Yes, there is. So look at the map of Nigeria. There is no banditry in the southeast, south, or southwest. The whole of the north, the three geopolitical zones in the north, the northwest, northeast, and north central have become killing fields of these bandits. And before 2015, the northwest was not where it is today. I could drive from Abuja where I'm from without any fear. Now I cannot drive from Abuja to Kaduna, but you can drive from Lagos to without that fear. So yes, banditry and insecurity is more acute in the whole of the north today. And that was why I needed to raise that issue and ask everybody, every man and woman of conscience, silence is not the answer. Our leadership, we voted them into power, and our democracy does not end at the ballot box. We have to hold them accountable. Our people are being killed every day. We are having mass graves in the north all over. You don't see mass graves anywhere in the south. Our women are being raped. There is famine. And yes, we must raise our voices and be very angry. And our anger should be loud and clearly heard. This is serious. So yes, acute insecurity is in the north, the whole of the 3 geopolitical zones in the north. And that was why I made that point. That silence in the face of evil is itself evil. So we must all raise our voices so that our leadership will hear us loud and clearly.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, in that your piece, you held President Buhari personally responsible. You accuse him of being uncaring, of not paying enough attention. Will you, in retrospect, consider that fair criticism, considering the fact that, yes, the buck stops at his desk, but he has assigned the job to some people, and the governors also have a role to play?
Good. So when people talk about service chiefs, I'm not worried about service chiefs. I did not elect any service chief. We elected President Muhammadu Buhari twice to run this nation. And the buck stops there. If anybody is not doing his work, just say, thank you very much, General, for your service to the nation. We need to move on. The security of this nation is over and above any single individual or agency. So it is the responsibility of the president, and he alone we will hold responsible. No governor has control over any security agency. The governor in my state, Katsina State, has literally given up. He's thrown in the towel. People are being killed every day. He does not have an army, neither does he have an air force or intelligence agency. So the responsibility is at the center. The responsibility is the president, not the service chiefs, because we did not elect them. He can fire anybody or hire anybody he wants today. But the states have given up. And our governor in Katsina State has said it, literally, thrown in the towel, and apologized to our people in Katsina that he cannot look at them in the eyes because he has failed them. He said it. And I commend him for his character, but in many places he will resign for doing that. So yes, the responsibility is the president, and he needs to take that responsibility seriously. If anybody is not doing what he needs, he has to go. He has to go.
Well, Malam JEGA, let me come to you. Do you share the view that the governors are more or less helpless in this matter? You having concluded in your essay that the security of lives and property is something that cannot be negotiated at any level.
Well, there is no doubt about that. And the fact of the matter, as Prof said, is that all the security agencies in Nigeria are federal. There is some level to which the state governors exercise some little control over police commands and other security agencies in their states, but it is very little. And it is the federal government that recruits, trains, arms, pays, motivates, and ultimately commands the security agency. So to that extent, it is primarily a federal responsibility. And as Prof also said, we shouldn't be wasting too much time about the fate of the particular service chiefs, because only the president is elected, and he is the one who the electorate must hold accountable. However, that is not to say that state governors and even to some extent local government chairmen have some input and some influence over the security matters in their own states. It's not only deploying security agencies, other things can be done, and governors and even local government chairmen have a lot of resources, not enough resources, but a lot of resources at their disposal. I mean political resources, they have traditional rulers, they have political parties with deep roots in the community, they have access to elders. So there are many things that can be done, although ultimately security is a federal responsibility. Well,
Professor Yusuf, let's talk briefly about one of the points you raised in your piece, which is about rape, the rape of women in the north. And I guess someone will extend it and say across Nigeria. The Attorney General of the Federation is proposing special courts, the opening of a sexual offenders register in police formations, and other measures, including the review of relevant laws to address this. Do you think that this is a good step in the right direction?
Well, he should go to the forest. He should go to the forest and tell those bandits. These guys are not ruled by any law. They are high on tramadol and cannabis. They come into our villages in the middle of the night in their hundreds on motorcycles and bang into the doors when people are laying down with their family and rape their women, their wives, and their mothers in front of them. And we're making laws here. We need to go deal with them in the forest, not here in Abuja making law. Yeah, law is good. We've always had laws against rape. But you think these guys are governed by any law? So let's be serious about this. These bandits are lawless. We need to deal with them. And yes, the law is okay, it's good. But security, go and deal with these bandits that are terrorizing and raping our women. So rape in any society, in any culture, is evil. And everybody must speak up against it. The laws are good. But these guys do not follow any law. Go flush them out of the forest and then bring them into the cities for justice.
Well, Madam JEGA, what are your thoughts on the way forward? Because as Nigerians, we are aware that at some point the service chiefs told us that they were rejigging the security architecture. Somewhere down the line, we were also told that a national security strategy document had been prepared, and that was advertised and celebrated. But all of that seems not to be working. What, in your opinion, needs to be done?
Wow, it's a complicated problem. I'm not a security expert by any means, but what is obvious is that the security agencies in Nigeria do not have enough personnel, enough material, and enough motivation. Certainly, because as anybody can see, the army is heavily engaged fighting Boko Haram for 10 years, and then suddenly you have security problems all over the country, and it has all kinds of operations in the east, in the west, in the Niger Delta, in the north central, in the northwest. You have all kinds of security operations. So clearly, the military is undermanned. Now, what I cannot understand is because this problem didn't happen yesterday or the day before. It has been on for 10 years at least, and there was no reason why the federal government did not seriously augment the number of men and women in the security agencies. I mean, I gave the example in the write-up that you mentioned that during the Civil War, the army grew from 15,000 to 250,000 in less than 3 years. So much so that when the Civil War ended, the federal government that time of Gawan and later the Murtala Obasanjo regime had to talk about demobilization because they had 250,000 soldiers on their hands and there was no need for them. Now, I wish we had 250,000 soldiers today, or even maybe 200. I don't know exactly how many we have, but certainly the number is an issue. But more than the number is also the equipment and the mobility, because like fighting Boko Haram is not an issue of very large number. It is arming and equipping and protecting them very well. I believe the government is doing some few things in that direction, but there just has to be an emergency situation. And I don't mean just signing papers and saying you have declared a state of emergency. That is not the issue. You have to be truly on a war footing in order to augment and to equip all the security agencies in the northwest, in the northeast, in the north central, and all parts of the country, because security should be number one. If that is the only thing that the government does, in the 3 years remaining for the administration, you would have done something. Because without it, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters.
Well, Malam JEGA, just before we wrap up this conversation, if we were to rate the Buhari administration in the last 5 years from, say, 0 to 100, what percentage will you give him? And I'll come to you, Professor Yusuf, to also do your own rating very briefly before we go. Yes, Malam JEGA, you go first. That's beyond security.
I
if you take the entire
score
performance.
To award. Yeah.
You said what?
I said I have no marks to award to the administration.
Oh, does that mean 0? Does that mean 0, Malam JEGA?
No. I used to be a lecturer, and
yes.
You don't award marks without seeing the scripts and having a marking.
No, but you have a script before you: security, the economy, and fighting corruption.
In security, the score is very poor. With respect to the economy, the score is poor. And with respect to fighting corruption, the scorecard is very controversial.
Okay, now over to you, Professor Yusuf. Well, you are also a teacher like Malam JEGA. So what's your own scoring sheet looking like?
On what?
On the 3 key issues in the last 5 years: security, fighting corruption, and the economy.
Good. So it's very simple. In economy, ask a common Nigerian, is his life better today than it was 5 years ago? The answer is no. On security, are we safer today than 5 years ago? I come from the northwest, from Katsina. I could drive from here to Katsina without molestation, go through Abuja, go from Abuja to Kaduna, Kankara, and Katsina. Can I do that now? No. 9 local governments in Katsina are under the control of these bandits. Go to Katsina and ask them. Go to Zamfara and ask them. Go to Sokoto and ask them. Plateau, Adama, the story is the same. So security is an F. The economy is an F. What else? Corruption is more verbal than real. So as a teacher, I will rate this government an F. And they have to do better. And they have 3 years to do that.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Usman Yusuf. And thank you very much, Malam Mahmoud JEGA, for joining us today on THISDAY Live. It's time now for a break here on THISDAY Live, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to THISDAY Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Joining me now in the studio are Professor BOLA AKINTERINWA, Director General, Bolytag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and YEMI ADAMOLEKUN, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Well, Prof and YEMI, good to have you here. Again, you listen to Professor Yusuf and Malam Mahmoud JEGA, Chairman Editorial Board of the Daily Trust newspaper, on the issue and the challenge of insecurity in Nigeria. So quickly, without wasting time, I'd like to take your thoughts on the various issues that the 2 gentlemen raised. Yemi, let me start with you.
I think the real focus was on security, and I think Professor Yusuf was very clear about what he thought about the president's inactivity or inaction on the matter. Yes, the service chiefs are not elected, so he has the prerogative to change them, and that's been a demand. At least I know my organization has been part of other coalitions asking for the service chiefs to be fired. And so this current reading the Riot Act, he dismissed it, which I want to do as well, because it means nothing. This is 6 years into it, and we keep doing the same thing. I think it's Einstein that says you do the same thing expecting different results. And that's the definition of insanity. That's a bit of a problem. And for Malam JEGA, Malam JEGA tried to be diplomatic, but because I was writing here that what is Malam JEGA saying? I'm not quite sure. At one point he said the army needs to be equipped. Another time he said the governors and the local government chairman have a role to play. A role to play in what? In dealing with local militia to help when there's a government in place that has the state's powers of the state to enforce security. But by the end, when you asked him to score the administration, he then became very clear, at least in the scoring, I would take him on that rather than the things he said before, that the government has scored very poor when it comes to security. Look, when you have the president of a country, when the country is going through something like a pandemic and hasn't addressed the country in maybe 2 months, if I'm not mistaken, and then you have a situation where even his home state is being ravaged, the governors are crying out for help. People are then protesting, and then you arrest them. They've arrested 2 leaders of protesting, Katsina, for organizing protests and speaking out against the government. Now, if that's the messaging you are sending, and then you send your national security advisor to make a statement about the riot act, and you don't have the boldness nor the courage to address your country as the commander-in-chief of the country and say, look, this is enough. We've given the service to either fire them, whatever, actually clear steps of what you are doing to save the lives of your people. Now, if this was in the South, and Professor Yusuf made the point quite clearly that his article focused on the North because the North is where the heat is. If this was in the South, we could easily say that President Buhari, it's a North-South, but this is in the North. And some feedback has been like people expected a Messiah. He's watching his people get, quote unquote, get murdered and doing nothing. And that's what Professor Yusuf called being uncaring. So I think it's significant that people, elite in the North are speaking. The population in the North generally, I'm not the whole North, but people in the North, both at sort of everyday citizens in the North organizing protests. The
masses.
Yeah, I try not to use that word, but anyway, everyday people organizing protests and speaking out, and the elites like Professor Yusuf and Malam JEGA also speaking out. Now, for a president who, but again, let's be also very clear. There's nothing that President Buhari is doing now that's not consistent with his pattern of behavior over the last 6 years. So I think part of it maybe is really us beginning
5 years, you mean?
Oh, 5 years, thank you. Over the last 5 years. So I think part of us is really us re-examining why we expecting him to do anything different. Maybe we think Prof, the height of the killings
let's have Prof's input very quickly. So
I would like to agree to disagree with my 2 brothers, Professor Osman Yusuf and Malam JEGA. Agreement on the one hand, to the extent that we only have President Buhari as the only person elected, executive, and we should be held responsible. Agreement to the extent of their scoring, security-wise, poor, corruption, controversial, and then economy. Professor Yusuf asks, was life safer? Do they have more to eat? And so on and so forth. To this extent, I agree. But I disagree because of the confusion of the meaning of banditry in the context of Nigeria. Dr. Onaikomo, a leading security expert, has done a lot of research and has come up with a beautiful argument that has not been denied, which is the fact that banditry in the context of Nigerian meaning is nothing more than terrorism. Now, we have Boko Haramis on the one hand. You talk about ISWAP, Islamic State of
the West African province.
Now, this is nothing more than an instrument of jihadist terrorism. Now, it's a manifestation of terrorism par excellence. So if people are looking at bandits as if they are just thieves, using violence all along.
Well, that's Professor Yusuf's argument in his essay. He says the crisis you have in the Northeast is ideological, predominantly. What you have in the Northwest is basically criminality. He made that distinction.
Yes, you see, when you say criminality, stealing, is it not a crime? Killing is not a crime.
Ideology behind the criminality.
Precisely. Yeah. So that's why I talk about agreement and disagreement. For as long as the authority does not want to take banditry as an extension of terrorism by excellence, then this issue of saying you are sending service chiefs away, Professor Yusuf said that in his answer to security, he said they should go to the forest, to go and fight them. That's where the insecurity is. You are talking about rape all along. You are talking about court. What will the court do? When the criminality, you know, the acts of crimes are taking place in the forest.
Okay.
So this is
points
the
were made on the challenge of insecurity in the country. Let's take another interesting subject, which is the Edo State situation.
No, just on the rape, because of what's the scourge in the country at the moment. I love Professor Yusuf's point about that the laws are not the problem, that we have laws, but we have people who are not obeying laws, so that we should put that in perspective. A sexual register
which is why everybody
exists.
is calling for reform of the laws and other institutional reforms. Yeah. The permutations for the Edo State governorship elections took another turn on Saturday with the clearance of Governor Godwin Obaseki to seek re-election on the platform of the main opposition People's Democratic Party, PDP. Obaseki had resigned from the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, earlier in the week after being controversially disqualified from contesting the party's forthcoming gubernatorial primary. From nowhere, Edo State, which had produced the national chairman of the APC, the governor, his deputy, and all members of the state legislature, suddenly became a PDP-led state. This followed the war of attrition between Obaseki and the APC national chairman, Adam Sochiomole, for several months, which culminated in the latter's suspension by the Court of Appeal last week, Tuesday. However, the crisis took a turn for the worse in the APC when 24 hours after Oshiomole's ouster, 3 of its executives, of the party's executives, former Governor Abiola Ajimobi, who is said to be lying ill in a Lagos hospital, Victor Giadom, and Hilary Etta, all lay claim to the post of acting chairman of the party. Meanwhile, a high court in Port Harcourt has granted an order of interim injunction restraining the APC from recognizing or regarding Victor Giadom as the acting national chairman of the party. This is as just as there were conflicting statements yesterday over the lifting of the suspension of Adam Sochiomole by the Ward 10 executives of the APC in Esako West local government area of Edo State. So that's the situation now in Edo State. The primaries will be held next week. In fact, the APC primary is tomorrow. But the APC in Edo State remains a house of confusion. And now the PDP has also become part of that confusion, because it may look to some people that Obaseki is moving from frying pan to fire. What do you think, Yemi?
It's unfortunate, really, that this is a topic for discussion. It's one of the, it's the leading up to the 2019 elections, there was a lot of conversation about APC and PDP being 6 and half a dozen. In 2016, when there were elections in Edo, my organization co-hosted a debate. Mr. Obaseki was on the platform of APC. Mr. Yamu was on the platform of the PDP. In 2020, when there's a debate, Obaseki will be on the platform of the PDP, and Yamu will be on the platform of the APC.
Isn't that democracy, freedom of association?
No, not at all, because parties are meant to be designed around, not even, exactly, based on ideologies. And I believe our constitution also sort of alludes to that. So I think what is clear, and I think any Nigerian should not be mistaken at all, and this is my opinion, that APC and PDP are fundamentally different parties. What might manifest as difference is individuals within those parties who choose to run their states in different ways or along certain ideologies. And we can see that. But it's dependent on the individual, not necessarily, I believe, the party. Because if it's the party, then there should be some uniformity. And tied to that is, I think between yesterday and today, the deputy governor of Ondo State has now decamped to the PDP. Ondo is an APC party, for those who are not aware.
There was that video showing how he was humiliated by his boss.
Exactly. So I think those things, for me, really, hopefully, allows Nigerians to think clearly about the fact that our political parties are simply special purpose vehicles for elections. And if that then is the case, 2 things. One, it allows an opportunity for a third force that we were talking about a lot last year, that's driven around ideology, can articulate that ideology clearly and begin to build. This is not what you do 6 months to an election, it's what you begin to do now, so that people understand that there's a difference. And then secondly, that when we go to elections while this transition period is happening, that people look beyond umbrella or a broom and look really at the people who are running for these offices and hold them accountable when they get it. I mean, Auntie Obi Ezekwesili, very famously with her Red Card movement, called it in 2019 the Butiku, i.e. Buhari and Atiku, that they're pretty much one and the same. And we continue to see that being manifested.
Well, Prof, I'd like to take your thoughts on this, but maybe we should take a break so that I don't have to interrupt you. But, okay, maybe you go ahead. Maybe we should skip the break.
Yes, let me
quickly, before we take
add a footnote to the submission of YEMI. The main problem raised, which many observers have not been looking into, is the issue of waiver, which the constitution of the various political parties provides for. Waiver. Now, when there is a provision for waiver, then a candidate does not necessarily meet the requirements of, required for contesting an election, for instance. At the level of Yamu, when he returned to the APC about a year ago,
December last year.
Now, what happened was that Obaseki, up till this point in time, prevented his registration, official registration, as a member of the party. But the same Yamu has been cleared to contest election, meaning now that the principle of waiver, that particular constitution applies to him. Ditto for Obaseki. You need a certain number of months to be eligible to contest for the gubernatorial position in the PDP. All these requirements are waived. Now, the point I'm trying to draw attention to there, which constitutes a major bane of the society, is that when we talk about institutional corruption, we are the one who actually provided for that. It is there. So there is the need to look into this aspect and then look at the future. Obaseki has just said that there is no rallying without government approval. Now, we will see what happens.
APC is planning to test him.
Well, I think the drama in Edo State is just beginning to unfold. So we've seen part one of it, we'll see the part two of it. But I just hope that all the gladiators at the end of the day will keep the interests of the state and of the people first. Because it looks like politics in that state at this moment, on both sides, the two main sides, APC, PDP, is driven more by individual ego and ambition and greed.
Yes.
Let's look at the update on COVID-19. Brazil has now reported more than 1 million confirmed cases of coronavirus and 48,954 deaths, marking a grim milestone for the South American country. The Health Ministry on Friday reported 54,771 new cases, a record daily spike that brought the nationwide total to over 1 million. Many experts believe that the number of cases may surpass the United States of America, and Brazil will soon become the new epicenter of the virus. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, the Nigerian Center for Disease Control announced through its official Twitter handle on Saturday a total of 661 new cases of COVID-19, bringing the total number of infections in the country to 19,808. The NCDC noted that the 661 new confirmed cases were reported in 14 states. The NCDC further stated that Lagos reported the highest number of infections with 230 new cases, and Rivers came second with 127 new infections. The spike in the number of infections in a number of countries led by Brazil came just as researchers at the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom announced that a cheap, widely available steroid, dexamethasone, has been found to be effective in reducing the number of COVID-19 related deaths. It may be early days yet, but experts are already saying that the drug could be a game changer in saving the lives of the sickest coronavirus victims. So good news, bad news. In the United Kingdom at the University of Oxford, we've been told dexamethasone will be useful or is useful for reducing the death toll where persons with severe cases are involved. In China, China is going through a second phase of human trials for a vaccine. And then in France also, you have similar efforts. So hopefully, at the end of the day, we may be able to get the vaccine earlier than we thought. The advantage of dexamethasone is that it's cheap, it's readily available. It's a drug that has been in use since the 1960s. But meanwhile, here in Nigeria, the numbers are going up. Prof, what do you think?
I do not have any problem in hoping for better days to come. There is beauty in it. At least you are satisfied. But the issue is that you cannot, on the one hand, seek an enduring solution while encouraging the problem to expand. Now, it's a contradiction in itself. In Brazil, in the US, and so on and so forth, take, for instance, for illustration, the presidential campaigns in the US, in the Americans, the president went on his campaigns encouraging people to come there to disregard, the protocols, no social distancing, no wearing of face masks. It's a critical issue there. Although he went there and expected that the whole center will be filled up with his supporters, but we are told that, look, probably around 20,000 people were there. Now, the issue is this. You cannot encourage the spread, all right, by neglect, by conscious policy, and at the same time be talking about the cure. Now, you are inciting people to death. And then the word you use here now, the sickest of the coronavirus victims. So I find this to be a distraction. And more importantly, in Nigeria, it's the same thing. I find it difficult to understand why we have problems at the level of churches and mosques, Muslims and Christians. What is this issue about God that everybody is talking about? If, for instance, you have the so-called spiritual powers to heal, you now make a pronouncement and say, coronavirus, I command you, go to hell. Do that one without necessarily bringing all others. I'm faithful, I'm a good Christian. I believe in God, I believe in the Bible. But I think people should worship God with common sense. There is the need to worship God with common sense. There's no need a pastor who is saying that there's nothing like a coronavirus.
Sorry to interject. It's not only pastors that are talking about God. In Tanzania, President Magufuli says God has eliminated COVID-19 from Tanzania. In Burundi, President Pierre Nkurunziza said God was in charge, but he died later of COVID-19 related complications.
The two of us are speaking in tongues. I'm only telling you that, look, you see, this is the issue. Why would a leader refuse or prefer to be myopic? When you don't understand. People who have understanding of the issue, allow them to talk and you save the lives of your people. That's what is happening in Nigeria.
Anyway, let me take YEMI simple. Still talking about leadership. I mean, in some countries, in China, they've had to lock down parts of Beijing. And in the last 3 days, they've tested over 2 million people because 26 cases were reported in the Simfadi market area. In New Zealand, Jacinta Ardern has had to call out the military to help just because 2 new cases were reported. But in the US, President Trump is saying testing, does not help because it's a double-edged sword. What's your take?
I mean, I'll just focus on Nigeria, really, and start with Edo, because you were talking about the elections and the interest of the masses at heart. Some of the footage we've seen already is cause for concern. I mean, people at rallies when Obaseki, I think, was at PDP, the people that surrounded the car, not wearing masks, not being protected. And then secondly, I think just to also talk about APC's use of Governor Ajimobi's name. I find it extremely distasteful, and I'm saying that because we're talking about COVID. It's been alleged that he has it. His family hasn't denied. What his family has come out to deny very forcefully is that he's still alive and he hasn't died. But this is a man who clearly is unable to, in a state where he's unable to speak for himself. And the fact that the political party, or the serving political party in Nigeria, is using his name for the advancement of party politics is really disgusting. And I just wanted to put that on record. But to your point about COVID, in the Nigerian context, I think my main challenge is an issue of communication. The truth is, as you were saying, we don't fully understand. We don't fully have the picture. Scientists are going, today, asymptomatic cases can do this. Tomorrow, maybe not. Today, mass can, maybe not. That's fine, because it's new. We all accept that it's new. But can we then not use that to understand why citizens themselves will also be a bit confused about really what is this thing? And make an effort to address specifically areas of confusion. To your point about places of worship, it's nothing peculiar to places of worship. We've banned spas, we've banned bars, we've banned restaurants, we've banned or indoor dining, we've banned event centers.
Interstate travel.
Exactly. No, I'm even talking about confined places.
Okay. Places
of worship are just a subset of confined spaces. So there's nothing peculiar about them.
Yes.
There's nothing special. It's just the fact that COVID travels faster within confined spaces. But as you said, why religious leaders choose to make this a big deal, I really don't understand. If the welfare of your congregants should be your priority. And lastly, I want to end with Cross River State. A lot of reporting on Cross River is around just reportage. What's the press statement? I watched the Commissioner of Health speak about the government importing COVID into the state, the same for the Commissioner of Information. I really want to challenge media platforms to do a bit more deep dive so that citizens get an opportunity to speak. Because while I understand the place of pride, if I want to use that word, or that we're doing something right, is why the state is COVID-free. But the seeming narrative that there's a conspiracy to give us COVID is...
Well, I think what state governments must realize is that awards are not given for being COVID-free.
Indeed.
And the Nigerian Center for Disease Control has made it very clear that they don't import either positive or negative samples to any state. Yeah. What they're interested in is in the GeneSPAT, model that they are using to ensure that there is testing and there is proper tracking of seroprevalence across Nigeria. Well, on that note, we've got to go. You've been watching THISDAY Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. For my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next week.